what we're looking at here is a method of locking down the endpoint. Now, this application has been created specifically tied to the ISM framework. So what we have under these options are specific ISM controls, and it covers off the essential 8 and the bulk of the rest of them, not just the 8. So this is things like stopping execution of macros on Word documents. It's blocking the ability for people to use floppy drives and tape drives. It is literally the ISM in an application, most of which probably, or not most of which, but some of which will not apply in all environments, like floppy disks. It's kind of hard to come across a drive, let alone a disk these days. But the option is there. And what this will do is let you set that policy then and synchronize the outcome of that policy for the particular endpoint back to the crystal eye. So if I install this on all my Windows endpoints, I then lock them down to the set of controls that I want. It's going to feed that back, and I'm going to have some metrics on these are exactly how my endpoints are configured. And that's just from the, the registry and the actual group policy configuration stuff that goes on here. The other component of that is the application allow listing. So this is endpoint level rather than at the network level. We do obviously recommend you use both because, again, multiple layers of security like an onion, it's better. If I say wanted to stop the Chromium application from being run on this machine, I have the ability to untick whitelist and activate allow listing. And this will stop this application from being able to run full stop. It is noted that this application will not run on anything but Windows 10 Enterprise Edition. That is the environment for which it has been designed for ISM compatible IRAP compliant networks. So you can install this from the Crystal Eye. It's under the compliance menu and under auditing in that section. There's a download there. It'll also give you a key. And that key is put in here, and this will establish that communication back to the Crystal Eye. Note that because I'm using an IP address and not a DNS or a host name, I do need to put in the port there, port 81, and that'll create that synchronization. I will go back to the Crystal Eye to show that data, but for the moment, just to describe this capability again, we create that zero trust model by establishing exactly what users do. Now, the kickback from this might be somebody really wants to use Facebook, and I'm not saying you can't use Facebook in the office. You don't have to say that, right? What you do then is if they need that capability or functionality, create a network segment for them that is an untrusted zone that does not communicate with business architecture or applications or does not have access to data that is sensitive, that might be exfiltrated, and let them use Facebook there. Just don't let them use Facebook on their endpoint where they, have Word documents and sensitive client information. The whole thing is just about segregation. So this application will then allow us to do that. And there is the capability then to create a base policy through that attack surface reduction hardening guide or section rather. So things like voice controller, which might not stand out as being a malicious application. The NSA is worried about Furbies recording their conversations and set out specific rooms. Similarly, the ISM has a section on recording devices. Now your laptop has voice recorder, so we should probably disable that in some environments. And then we'll have that audit of which machines on the network do have voice recorder enabled, and then we can control where they go. So this is probably going to tie more into a complete cybersecurity deployment with regards to people, processes, as well as technology and infrastructure controls. Yeah, there's not much more I can say about that without talking for hours about ISM, which is a very, very thick book. So if you want to play around with that within the Crystal Eye, there is that download option, which I'll jump back to. So we already touched on the risk auditing and the SIS-20 controls earlier. Under that same section is Windows Audit, which is your endpoint audit. Now this has, as I mentioned, it has that connection string or key that needs to be copied to the endpoint application to establish communication. And there's a download option here as well. So this download is going to be unique per crystal eye. You can't take this app from one crystal eye and stick it in another environment. You're going to need to download it from that one, as far as I'm aware. The point here is if you're using an MDM tool like Intune or similar, you can then download this application, drop it in your NDM, and apply it through group policy or through Intune or whatever it might be to all your endpoints with that configuration. So I can see device Mac here. This is the Windows endpoint sitting behind the crystal eye. And if I click View Audit Report, this is going to show me the status of all those. All right, so the particular sections that I'd seen earlier, or showed earlier rather, things like credential entry and elevation of privileges. This will give me a state of these. Now, this information can be tied then into an additional platform like a GRC platform or so forth to give some more aggregated metrics about your network segments and the configurations and policies and so forth. But there is a wealth of data here related to cybersecurity controls that is unrivaled. If you tried to go and do this without this application on every endpoint, I can tell you it is really harsh, especially on a network with hundreds of computers. It is just very, very difficult. And group policy objects and registry keys, if you try and do it that way through SCCM or through Intune or whatever it might be, they change all the time with every release of Windows. Microsoft moves them around. So keeping track of that, you may set a baseline on 100 or 1,000 computers one day, and the next week, none of the controls work anymore. Users can plug in USB drives, and you have this faith that it works, and then you get compromised and you wonder why. So this has that capability to make that whole process a lot easier. So instead of months, we're talking about days or hours to do that configuration. The main point, tying it back to the zero trust model, is that with all of these things, and not just this one, we need to define first what we're doing, what we're controlling, what users do, then create the policies, then apply the policies. We don't just go straight into applying policies willy-nilly to try and improve cybersecurity, because what's going to happen is it's going to stop somebody trying to do something they want to do. They're going to get upset. And a lot of the time, a system administrator is just going to, for the sake of availability and not having an annoyed person on the phone, re-enable the thing or disable the security controls, which we don't want to see. So the process needs to be undertaken very methodically, bit by bit if needed. Cybersecurity isn't the journey that you take in a day. You can look to segregate, micro-segregate over time, apply and improve controls over time. But this will give you out of the box, even with that balanced rule set and one network segment, enhanced visibility and monitoring that you would not have if you just had a standard firewall device.